Hong Kong is a city of lights. It is a city of neon signs that burn 24 hours a day, of skyscrapers that scrape the clouds, and of streets that are never, ever truly silent. If you stand in the middle of Wan Chai tonight, you are surrounded by life. You hear the roar of the double-decker buses, the ding-ding of the trams, the shouting of market vendors, and the clinking of glasses from the bars on Lockhart Road. It is a city of pure, unadulterated energy. In Chinese metaphysics, we call this Yin Energy, bright, loud, alive. But Hong Kong is also a city of shadows. And sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. If you know where to look, past the luxury malls and the five-star hotels, you will find the cracks in the concrete. You will find the places that the city forgot, or perhaps the places the city tried to forget but couldn't. Tonight, we are going to one of those places. If you walk up from the noise of Queens Road East, turning onto Ship Street, the atmosphere begins to change. The air gets a little stiller. The humidity feels a little heavier, sticking to your skin like a cold sweat. You leave the modern world behind, step by step, until you reach a steep set of stairs. And there, looming above you, sitting on a podium of overgrown stone, is a house that shouldn't exist. It is a 2-story mansion made of red brick, with green iron grates over the windows. It looks like a bleeding wound in the middle of the gray city. This is Nam Koo Terrace. For decades, developers have wanted to tear it down. They want to turn this prime piece of real estate into another glittering tower, but they haven't. Plans stall. Workers get sick. The house remains. Why? Because the locals know that Nam Koo Terrace is not empty. They say it is one of the most fierce locations in all of Asia. They say that if you stand near the gate after midnight, you don't hear the traffic anymore. You hear the sound of women crying. You hear the heavy boots of soldiers who died 80 years ago. And in November 2003, a group of teenagers found out that these weren't just stories. They found out that sometimes, when you stare into the dark reaches out and grabs you. This is the full, untold story of the Wan Chai haunted house. To understand what happened that night in 2003, you have to understand the mindset of a Hong Kong teenager in the early 2000s. There was no TikTok. There was no YouTube as we know it today. If you wanted excitement, if you wanted to prove you were tough, you didn't do it online. You did it in the real world. Urban exploration, or urbex, was a rite of passage. There was a list of the top 10 haunted spots in Hong Kong. High Street Ghost House, so Lo Pun Village, Bride's Pool. But Nam Koo Terrace was special. It was right in the middle of the city. It was accessible. It was taunting you. The rumors about the house had been circulating since the 1970s. Every generation of students passed them down to the next, like a dark inheritance. The story was always the same. Don't go in. The women are angry. The soldiers are hungry. Grandmothers in the Wan Chai market would warn their grandchildren not to look at the house when walking home. They spoke of dirty things, spirits that had lost their way and become twisted by resentment. They said the house was a yin portal, a place where the barrier between our world and the spirit world was paper thin. But for a group of 4 secondary school students, 3 girls and 1 boy, these warnings were just fuel. They were invitations. It was November. The weather in Hong Kong finally starts to cool down in November, losing that oppressive summer heat. It was the perfect night for a ghost hunt. They met near the bottom of Ship Street, They had torches. They had snacks. They had the nervous, giggling energy of kids doing something they knew they weren't supposed to do. They probably joked about what they would do if they saw a ghost. One of them probably said, "I'll punch it," and they all laughed. They had no idea that within 3 hours, one of them would be strapped to a hospital gurney, screaming in a voice that wasn't hers. They climbed the stone steps. The gate was old, rusted, and easily bypassed. As they stepped onto the terrace, the silence hit them. If you have ever been to an abandoned place in a loud city, you know this feeling. It's unnatural. The sounds of Wan Chai, the taxis, the sirens, seemed to be muffled, as if the house was wrapped in a thick blanket. They clicked on their torches. The beams of light cut through the gloom, illuminating peeling paint, rot, and the debris of decades. They walked in. We have pieced together the events of that night from newspaper reports, police logs, and the few fragmented accounts that surfaced on internet forums in the years following. At first, it was just exploration. They walked through the ground floor. The high ceilings of the main hall were covered in cobwebs. The floor was thick with dust. They found old furniture, left behind and rotting. They found graffiti left by other explorers, names, dates, crude drawings. It felt safe. It felt like a game. But as they moved toward the staircase to the second floor, the atmosphere shifted. One of the girls, reports refer to her as Wing, was the most sensitive of the group. In Chinese culture, we say someone has light shoulders or a weak basi, meaning they are more easily influenced by spirits. Wing started to complain that it was cold, not a natural chill, but a deep, freezing sensation that seemed to come from inside her bones. She told her friends that she felt like she was being watched. She said the shadows in the corners of the room were moving, shifting, reaching out. "Let's go," she reportedly whispered. "They don't want us here." Her friends, running on adrenaline, dismissed it. "It's just your imagination," they said. "Don't be a coward." The boy in the group led the way up the wooden stairs. They creaked and groaned under their weight. They reached the second floor. This is where the legend says the worst atrocities happened during the war. This is where the comfort women were kept. As they stood in one of the empty bedrooms, looking out at the neon glow of the Hopewell Center nearby, Wing went silent. Her friends turned to look at her. She was standing perfectly still, her head bowed. "Wing?" one of the girls asked. Wing didn't answer. Her breathing became ragged, heavy, and wet. Then she looked up. The witnesses, her terrified friends, later told police that her face had changed. Her expression was no longer that of a teenage girl. It was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage and sorrow. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, staring at something behind the boy. She let out a scream. It wasn't a high-pitched scream of shock. It was a guttural, animalistic roar. And then she began to speak. But she wasn't speaking Cantonese. She was shouting in a language that sounded like Japanese. Harsh, commanding tones mixed with whimpering, high-pitched pleas. It was a cacophony of voices coming from one throat. One moment, she was the aggressor, shouting orders. The next, she was the victim, begging, crying, pleading for mercy. Panic erupted. The other 3 students grabbed her, trying to shake her out of it. "Wing, wake up. Stop it." But Wing, a slender girl of no more than 100 pounds, shoved them away with the strength of a grown man. She threw herself against the wall. She clawed at her own skin. She pointed at the empty corner of the room and screamed, "Why are you doing this? Let me go! Let me go!" Realizing this was beyond a prank, the friends scrambled for their phones. Reception was spotty, the signal flickering in and out as if the house itself was jamming the frequency. Finally, they got through to 999. "Help us," they screamed into the phone. "Our friend she's going crazy. She's possessed." When the police arrived, they expected a drug overdose. They expected drunk kids. What they found was a scene from a nightmare. Officers had to climb the hill with flashlights. When they entered the house, they found the group in a state of absolute hysteria. The three friends were huddled in a corner, sobbing. Wing was in the center of the room, still thrashing, still babbling in that strange mix of tongues. It took multiple officers and paramedics to restrain her. They had to strap her to a stretcher. There's a famous photo from that night, published in the local newspapers, like the Oriental Daily. It shows the girl, strapped down, being wheeled out of the red brick house. Her face is blurred, but her body language is chaotic. You can see the terror in the posture of the paramedics. She was taken to WWII Hospital. The official medical diagnosis was an acute psychotic break brought on by stress and hysteria. But the story didn't end at the hospital. In the days following, rumors exploded across Hong Kong. A security guard at a nearby building claimed that as the ambulance drove away, he looked up at Nam Koo Terrace. He saw the red light of the ambulance reflecting on the windows. And in the window of the second floor, the room they had just cleared, he saw a figure, a woman, long hair, wearing a red cheongsam. She was standing there, watching the ambulance leave, and she was smiling. The newspapers ran with the headline, "Ghost House Possession." It became the most talked about event in the city. But to understand why this happened, why the energy in that house is so violent, we have to peel back the layers of history. We have to go back to the days when the red bricks were new and the world was falling apart. Nam Koo Terrace was built around 1918 by a wealthy Shanghainese silk merchant named Tu Chunman. For 20 years, it was a symbol of success. It was a happy home. It was a place of parties, of family dinners, of children playing in the garden. But in December 1941, the darkness came. The Imperial Japanese Army crossed the border. The Battle of Hong Kong lasted 18 days. When the British surrendered, the occupation began. It was a time of starvation, fear, and brutality. The Japanese military requisitioned the finest buildings in the city for their officers. Nam Koo Terrace, with its commanding view of Wan Chai and the harbor, was a perfect choice. But it wasn't used as an office. It was used as a comfort station. This is a polite term for a horrific reality. Soldiers would kidnap women from the streets of Wan Chai and Lockhart Road. They would drag them up the stairs of Nam Koo Terrace. We cannot know the exact number of women who passed through those doors, but we know the nature of the comfort women system. It was systematic rape. It was torture. The women were treated as supplies, not humans. Imagine the energy of that place in 1942. The screams were muffled by the thick brick walls. The pain was absorbed into the floorboards. The despair soaked into the very foundation of the hill. Many women died there. Some were killed by soldiers when they became sick or pregnant. Others took their own lives, leaping from the balconies or hanging themselves from the rafters, choosing death over another day of torture. And when the war ended in 1945, the Japanese left. The two family eventually reclaimed the property, but it was never the same. The energy had shifted. In Feng Shui, we believe that land has a memory. Buildings are not just inanimate objects, they are containers. When a tragedy of this scale happens, violent, sudden, emotional death, it creates a stain that cannot be scrubbed away with soap and water. It creates a vortex of Yin Energy. The two family eventually moved out. The house was sold, passed from hand to hand, but no one stayed long. Why? Because the tenants reported the same things over and over again. The sound of footsteps in empty hallways, the smell of old blood that would suddenly fill a room and then vanish, and the dreams. Every person who slept in the house reported nightmares of being trapped, of being chased, of drowning in darkness. The house was abandoned in the 1980s, and that is when the spirits truly took over. Since the 2003 possession, Nam Koo Terrace has been fenced off. It is guarded, but the stories haven't stopped. In fact, they have only gotten stranger. There is the story of the taxi driver. It's a classic urban legend, but in Wan Chai, drivers swear it is true. A driver picks up a female passenger on Queens Road East late at night. She is pale, quiet, dressed in 1940s style clothing. She asks to be taken to the red house on the hill. The driver is confused, but drives up Ship Street. When he arrives at the gate of Nam Koo Terrace, he turns around to ask for the fare. The back seat is empty, but on the seat, there's a wet patch and the smell of seawater and rot. Then there are the construction workers. A few years ago, a development company tried to start renovation work. They put up bamboo scaffolding, but the workers refused to work after sundown. They reported that their tools would go missing and reappear in dangerous places. They claimed that the bamboo poles would shake violently when there was no wind. One worker claimed that while he was working on the roof, he felt a pair of hands push him. He managed to grab a railing and save himself, but he never went back. The construction stalled. The scaffolding came down. The house remains untouched. Spiritual masters and Feng Shui experts have analyzed the site. They say the house sits on a dragon vein, but the vein has been corrupted. The suffering of the women during the war has turned the earth sour. They say the spirits there are not just ghosts, they are earthbound spirits. They are trapped in a loop, reliving their trauma every single night. When Wing and her friends entered the house in 2003, they walked right into the middle of that loop. Wing, being sensitive, became a vessel. The spirits saw a way to speak. They saw a way to scream their pain to a world that had forgotten them. Today, Wan Chai is more modern than ever. There are hipster coffee shops just down the street from Nam Koo Terrace. There are luxury apartments selling for millions of dollars that overlook its rotting roof. It is a strange contrast, the living and the dead, sitting side by side. The house is currently owned by a large property group. They have announced plans, yet again, to revitalize it. They want to open it to the public, but you have to ask yourself, can you ever really clean a place like that? You can paint over the red bricks. You can replace the floorboards. You can put in electric lights and air conditioning. But can you evict the sorrow? If you ever find yourself in Hong Kong, walking through the busy streets of Wan Chai, feel free to walk up Ship Street. Look at the house. Take a photo from behind the gate. But I am warning you, as a friend, do not climb the fence. Do not go inside. And if you see a woman in the window looking back at you, do not hold her gaze, because the door to Nam Koo Terrace might be locked, but the things inside, they are awake, they are waiting, and they are very, very lonely. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you have your own story about Nam Koo Terrace or any other haunted place in Hong Kong, leave it in the comments below. I'll see you in the next nightmare. Stay safe.